36 years later, Star Trek surprisingly calls out Joe Piscopo's comic on TNG. Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5, Episode 6 has Lieutenant Bradward Boimler Jack Quaid unexpectedly name-drop the comic Joe Piscopo played in Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 2 back in 1988. Crossing the midway point of Star Trek Lower Decks' final season on Paramount+, the crew of the USS Cerritos takes a break from investigating rifts in space that lead to alternate Star Trek timelines to broker peace between warring factions of aliens who are cubes and spheres. However, LT Brad Boimler remains obsessed with becoming more like the alternate universe bearded Boimler he met in Star Trek Lower Decks' Season 5 premiere, Dos Cerritos. Boimler has been growing a beard, and he's obsessed with the bearded Bradward's files and the PADD he swiped from the parallel universe. When his roommate, LT Sam Rutherford, Eugene Cordero, asks to borrow Brad's alt-universe PADD, a flustered Boimler feigns ignorance and says, "Alt-universe? Good joke. We got a regular Ronald B. Moore over here. Working on your stand-up, huh? But wait, who is Ronald B. Moore?" In another of Star Trek Lower Decks' fabled deep cuts references, LT Brad Boimler name drops Ronald B. Moore, aka the comic played by Joe Piscopo in Star Trek The Next Generation Season 2, Episode 4, The Outrageous Okona, along with guest starring Billy Campbell as Captain Thadian Okona and Terry Hatcher as Transporter Chief BG. Robinson, The Outrageous Okona, features Joe Piscopo as a holographic stand-up comedian at Charnock's comedy cabaret. The LT Commander Data, Brent Spiner, consults to learn more about humor. However, Data only calls the tuxedoed hologram Mr. Comic on screen. Joe Piscopo's Star Trek The Next Generation comic is named Ronald B. Moore, which is listed in the USS Enterprise D's holographic program, but it's a detail that only hardcore truckers would know. LT Brad Boimler is just that hardcore and aficionado of Starfleet history. Of course, Boimler would somehow have known that Data once met with a holographic comedian named Ronald B. Moore to try to understand what humans think is funny. It's also very Boimler that Joe Piscopo's comic is who he instantly thought of when referencing a comedian. Incredibly, there are 3 people involved in Star Trek named Ronald Moore. Ronald B. Moore, the comedian Joe Piscopo played in Star Trek The Next Generation, is named after the real-life Ronald B. Moore, the Emmy Award-winning visual effects supervisor. The flesh and blood Ronald B. Moore worked on Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Generations, Star Trek Voyager, and Star Trek Enterprise. Moore even appeared on a computer screen as Commander Ronald Moore in Star Trek Enterprise's series finale. These are the Voyages. Both the holographic and real-life Ronald B. Moore predate the Ronald Moore Star Trek fans are most familiar with. Ronald D. Moore, the legendary writer and showrunner. Ronald D. Moore wrote for Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager, and co-created For All Mankind. But Moore might be most acclaimed as the creator and showrunner of Battlestar Galactica. Ronald D. Moore also co-wrote Star Trek Generations, Star Trek First Contact, and Mission Impossible 2 with Brannon Braga. Star Trek Lower Decks shouting out Ronald B. Moore can be considered a nod to the incredible triple threat legacy of Ronald Moores in Star Trek. In the vast universe of Star Trek, a franchise celebrated for its exploration of futuristic technology, intergalactic politics, and the human condition, one thing has remained a hallmark since its inception in 1966, its ability to weave humor into its deep space dramas. Whether through witty banter or moments of comic relief, Star Trek has never been afraid to let its characters laugh, even in the face of cosmic adversity. However, it came as a surprising revelation when, 36 years later, the Star Trek universe made a subtle but unmistakable call out to a specific piece of comedic history: Joe Piscopo's comic turn on Star Trek The Next Generation TNG. For those who may need a refresher, Piscopo's appearance in TNG is a memorable and quirky entry in the annals of the Star Trek franchise. In the Season 2 episode titled The Outrageous Okona, which first aired in 1988, Piscopo played the role of a holodeck comedian who helps Data, the android officer aboard the USS Enterprise D, understand humor. While TNG is known for tackling existential themes, interstellar diplomacy, and moral quandaries, this episode took a different approach by focusing on Data's quest to comprehend the elusive concept of comedy. Piscopo's performance, while played for laughs, was both a satire and homage to the art of stand-up comedy, embodying a fusion of classic vaudevillian humor and slapstick. His over-the-top performance as a stereotypical 20th century comic was certainly an interesting moment for the show, introducing viewers to a bizarre yet endearing scenario where Data earnestly tried to understand why humans laugh. At the time, Piscopo was widely known for his work on Saturday Night Live, where his celebrity impressions and comedic chops had won him a dedicated following. His Star Trek appearance was a continuation of that persona, showcasing his ability to parody the classic stand-up routines of comedians like Rodney Dangerfield and Henny Youngman. Despite being one of the more lighthearted moments in the series, the episode was met with a mixed reception. Some fans found it charming, while others felt the humor was a bit too broad for TNG's more serious tone. But here we are, decades later, and Star Trek has chosen to revisit Piscopo's brief foray into the 24th century in a surprising and nostalgic way. The 2025 release of Star Trek Legacy, a new series that continues the lineage of the Next Generation crew, includes a sly reference to Joe Piscopo's character. In an episode where a new crew member, a holographic engineer fascinated by the evolution of humor, introduces a retro comedy mode for the holodeck, fans were treated to a delightful Easter egg. As the holodeck springs to life, projecting holograms of famous comedians, the hologram briefly morphs into a figure resembling Piscopo's 20th century comic from TNG. The character delivers one of his groan-inducing jokes, a reference to the original material from the outrageous Okona. Timing is everything, and apparently it takes 36 years for the punchline to land in Star Trek, quips the new holographic engineer, delivering a meta-commentary on the franchise's enduring legacy and its ability to keep fans guessing. The call-out to Piscopo's comic performance is a curious decision, one that speaks to both Star Trek's self-awareness and its evolving relationship with humor. While Star Trek has always included comedic moments, this reference highlights how the franchise has embraced a more layered and self-referential approach to its storytelling. Where once TNG might have handled the subject of humor with a degree of awkwardness, after all, Data's inability to grasp the essence of a joke was as much a critique of 1980s stand-up as it was a nod to his android nature. Star Trek Legacy shows that the franchise has grown more comfortable poking fun at itself. The reference to Piscopo also demonstrates a respect for the quirks of Star Trek's past, even those elements that may not have been as well received at the time. It's a reminder that no moment, no matter how seemingly insignificant or campy, is ever truly forgotten in a universe as vast and detailed as Star Trek's. By bringing back the memory of Piscopo's comic, Legacy not only pays tribute to the franchise's long history, but also celebrates the sometimes awkward, sometimes brilliant moments that have made it a cultural institution. This subtle Easter egg also serves as a testament to the franchise's multi-generational appeal. For fans who have been with Star Trek since TNG, the reference is a nostalgic nod to the past, an acknowledgement that the things they love, and sometimes cringe at, from decades ago, are still part of the tapestry that makes up the franchise. For newer viewers, it might just be a strange moment in an episode, but it encourages them to explore Star Trek's rich history, leading them back to episodes like the outrageous Okona. Ultimately, Star Trek's decision to call out Joe Piscopo's comic on TNG 36 years later is a reminder of the franchise's commitment to its roots, its willingness to evolve, and its ability to laugh at itself. In a universe filled with intergalactic wars, time travel, and moral dilemmas, sometimes it's the simplest moments, like a bad joke on a holodeck, that resonate the most,